bit of background about myself. I was formerly Managing Director for consumer markets for Call Credit, which is one of the 3 credit reference agencies here in the UK. There's Equifax, Experian and Call Credit. And for the last 4 years, I ran the consumer division of Call Credit. So that's my sort of background in this area of credit referencing. Before that, quite a long career in the banking industry and the consulting industry and the technology world. Crossword itself is a new company that we set up about a year ago. We are a new research-driven cybersecurity company. We're publicly quoted on GXG, which is the European Small and Medium-Sized Business Stock Exchange. And our focus is on looking for interesting areas of research in European universities where they're doing research into cybersecurity and establishing long-term relationships with those universities, transferring their cybersecurity technology, expertise and ideas out of the university and applying it to the commercial domain. So we have a cybersecurity development team that builds solutions based on that intellectual property and a commercial team that understands what clients want and looks for solutions within the universities that we can take out to industry. We have about 4 projects underway with different universities at the moment. Cybersecurity itself, I put on there sort of the boring definition, if you like, which is that cybersecurity is the body of technologies, processes and practices that is designed to protect networks, computers, programs and data from attack or damage or unauthorized access. So really what we're talking about is how do you protect your computers, your networks, your programs from being attacked from inside or outside the organization. And that's what this domain of cybersecurity is about. But as I go through the slides, I'll try and sort of bring it to life a bit more. For some reason that I now don't completely understand, I put in the slide showing the directors of the company and what we've done, so you can read that at your leisure. I think I put it in to show that I'm younger and more handsome than all the other directors, but you can be the judge of that. Cybersecurity challenge. So what's actually going on at the moment in this domain of cybersecurity? Well, you may have heard about things like eBay that was attacked last year and hackers accessed 128 million eBay passwords, names, email addresses. And at the time it was described as probably one of the biggest data breaches in the history of the internet. And the point that the Financial Times was making when it was talking about this issue was that bosses, the executives of companies, no longer have any excuse when things go wrong in their company around cybersecurity issues. Companies must become far more serious about both preventing and tackling these risks, because I think there's a bit of a culture of companies, at least executives within companies, saying, well, this whole issue of cybersecurity, that's something to do with the IT department. I don't need to worry about it. My chief information officer or my head of IT will deal with that. But I think the impact these breaches can have means that actually this is an executive issue. Not long or around the same time, there was another major security flaw that was called Heartbleed that again impacted huge numbers of computers around the internet and allowed hackers to potentially access personal information and passwords, and possibly have been doing this for the last couple of years. So sometimes you have these issues that are out there and it takes 1 or 2 years or even longer before they're discovered. The impact really can be quite large. In the UK, security experts have estimated that there are something like 50 million cyber attacks a year, costing the UK economy upwards of £27 billion a year. They estimate that a large company that's been the victim of a breach, it can cost that company anything from £500,000 close to £1 million a year. and that more than 90% of large organizations had had some sort of security breach in the previous 12 months. The reports are the same coming out of the US. US regulators and the number of companies reporting cybersecurity concerns to US regulators has doubled in the last couple of years. And the feeling is that these attacks are increasing in sophistication and frequency. So this is a challenging area and something that all of us need to be very aware of and make sure that we focus on. Now, as I said, as Crossword, what we do is we look and see what's going on in universities and what sort of research they're doing to try and tackle these issues. We've looked at every university in the UK, and there's something like 200 or more cybersecurity projects going on or have gone on over the last few years in UK universities. They've made use of upwards of £150 million of grant money, and there are about 50 universities in the UK that are working in this area. And they're working in a lot of different areas, whether it's insider threat, access control, cloud computing, Internet of Things. There are projects going on in all of these areas. One of the things that we've done as a company is to pull all of that information into an online database so that it covers all the projects that are going on in the UK in cybersecurity. And just as a sort of takeaway from this, we would be happy for you to have access for free to that database if you're interested, if you want to browse around and see what sort of research projects are actually going on in the UK at the moment in different aspects of cybersecurity. You'll find my contact details at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to get in touch and say you'd like access to the database, and we'll create a log-on ID for you, and you can take a look. So let's talk about cybersecurity and Credit Reporting Bureau, because this, I think, is a particularly interesting area coming from that background. And really the question is, why is cybersecurity a particular issue in my mind for credit reporting agencies, credit reporting bureaus around the world? And the answer, I think, is quite straightforward, and I'll illustrate it in this way. A while back, there was a bank robber in America called Willie Sutton, or Willie the actor Sutton, because all good bank robbers should have some sort of nickname. So it was Willie the actor Sutton, born 1901, died 1980, was active in the first part of the 1920 to 1940, that sort of era. At one point, he used to rob so many banks that a reporter asked him, why do you go around robbing banks all the time? And he's reported to have said, well, it's obvious, isn't it? It's because that's where the money is. Who else are you going to rob? Interestingly, in the days of digital information, the most valuable commodity is actually personal data. It's actually more valuable than money because you can use it over and over again to extract money. So smart criminals want to get hold of digital information, and the digital information they want to get hold of is personal data. So why do they target credit reporting agencies? Because you and the credit reporting agencies around the world have all the data. If I think back to my Call Credit days, we probably had several hundred organizations providing us with data on a monthly basis. All this information about people in the UK is updated. You'll have the same in your organization as well. If you're a cyber criminal and you're trying to get your hands on large amounts of personal information, you could start attacking the banks and the credit card companies one by one and trying to get information from them. But if you can attack the credit reporting agency, the credit reporting bureau, and gain access to your databases, then you potentially get everyone's information in one go. And that's why cyber criminals know that the place to look for large amounts of data is credit reporting bureaus, and credit reporting bureaus have to get really, really smart about protecting themselves. And this is already happening, and even the biggest players fall victim for this. So as recently as March 2013, Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian in the US reported that they had been attacked and have been seriously impacted, and credit report information on people such as Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, FBI director, appeared on a hacker's website. Experian in November 2014 notified another data breach involving the compromise of client login credentials to their database. So even the big players, the very experienced players in this area, still get targeted, and the same will apply for credit reporting bureau around the world as cyber criminals realize that there are large amounts of personal information held in databases by the various credit bureau. We will become more and more targets of attack. So the challenge is to defend ourselves against that. In order to do that, we have to understand what it is we're up against, what type of cyber criminal we're facing. To simplify it, I've looked at two types of cyber criminal. I call them the fraudster and the geek. They will attack you in different ways. So the fraudster, what the fraudster's trying to do, he's trying to trick you, he's trying to manipulate you, he's trying to cheat you. It's sometimes called social engineering. He's not necessarily a technical specialist, but he's using technology in order to trick you into giving away your information. The geek is a technology guy. He is trying to hack you, he's trying to plant viruses in your organization, extract information, extract data from your organization. And they tend to be different types of people. They tend to have different approaches to attacking the organization. One of the big areas that's growing in importance is what's called insider threat. And this is when you get someone, could be a fraudster, could be an employee, a consultant, an employee of a supplier or business partner, actually inside your organization and extracting data from your organization. And a lot of work, both research work and thinking, is going into how do you protect yourself against the insider threat. But let's have a look in more detail at the fraudster, what they do, what their bag of tricks are, and how they operate. So the simplest thing that we all know and love is spam. The fraudster sends you some spam saying, please hand over your money. The basic spam email that we've probably all had at some stage goes along the lines of somebody has died and they've left you a large amount of money. All you need to do is give me your bank details and pay a release fee, and we'll send you however many £1 million. And that sort of type of spam has been going on for ages, and you would think that in this day and age people don't fall for it, but you'd be surprised that people do fall for it. There is a huge amount of spam that goes around the internet. It's estimated that well over 90% of all email that goes around the internet is actually spam. And if we ever tried to operate without our spam filters, our computers would immediately be completely flooded with spam emails. They do all sorts of things. There's a type of approach called spear phishing, which is where instead of just sending out a blanket email to everyone, I, as the fraudster, target you very specifically. I learn about you, I tailor my email to you, and I try and target you. Now, one of the mistakes you can make in this area of cybersecurity, and it's a big mistake and people often make it, is that you can make the mistake thinking that you are smarter than the fraudster. And I can pretty much assure you the fraudster is smarter than you are. These are very, very smart guys. They know exactly what they're doing. I once spoke to some guys who did this sort of spam, and I said to them, look, why is the English grammar so bad in these emails? Why can't you just write a sensible, if you're really trying to convince people, why can't you just write a sensible email? And the chap said to me, well, bear in mind what we're doing, Tom. We're not just trying to hook people who are greedy, we're trying to hook people who are greedy and stupid. So if they don't know better that this email is an obvious fake email, then they're precisely the sort of person we're trying to hook. These are guys who know exactly what they're doing. They'll target small churches. That's a thing that works quite well, quite sadly, actually. Sometimes they target small churches and they say, so-and-so died and they really wanted to give money to your church. They've left you $100,000 or they've left you $1 million. Please send over the details of your church and please do a collection and pay a small fee and we'll release this large donation to you. The church does the connection, pays the small fee, and they never see their money again. People have been hit for a few $100, a few $1,000. It just goes on and on. So the thing to do is to assume that these guys are smart and to assume that they are thinking hard about how to fool you into handing over your money. One of the things I've seen not that long ago, actually, and it still goes on, is on dating sites. This is an area where fraudsters have been playing around a lot. What they'll do is they'll create a fake identity on the dating site and they'll start to, over time, build a relationship with the other person. To start with, it'll all be nice and happy and let me tell you about myself and tell me about you and sharing ideas and so forth. And then gradually, as the relationship builds online, the requests for money will come into play. And you'll be surprised how many people actually hand over money in this context. It happens to men and it happens to women, although the approaches that I've seen are different depending on whether it's men or women who are being targeted. What the fraudsters will do if they're targeting a woman, what they'll typically do is they'll target maybe a middle-aged woman on the site, and they'll create a profile of a slightly younger man, not a much younger man, but maybe just a few years younger. Sometimes they'll go to model agency sites and they'll take a picture from a model agency site and they'll use that as the picture that they use. They'll invent a child as well, because it's always good if you're a single man, maybe you're divorced and you've got an 8-year-old child, because that plays quite well. So you start talking about little Johnny and the woman that you're targeting gets to know little Johnny and you talk about his school and how he's getting on and so forth. And then you talk about how you're going on holiday, maybe you're going traveling in some other part of the world. And then all of a sudden, little Johnny gets sick. And you're stuck somewhere, and little Johnny's sick, and you've had to rush him to the clinic, and now the clinic wants you to pay $500, and they want the money today, and little Johnny's really in a bad way, so please can you send over the $500 as quickly as possible so that I can pay the bills, and I'll pay you back as soon as possible. And people send over the money. They really do, and then if they send over the money, you'll try again. Now you need $1,000 because you need to fly in back to the UK or back to the US, and it'll all be sorted out and settled when you get back. And this happens over and over again. And what I've seen people doing is they'll basically be running 6 or 10 different profiles at the same time. You'll have a fraudster sitting there. He will have dossiers of the women that he's trying to fool, and he'll be talking to them continuously at the same time. They have to work quite hard. Sometimes they'll be patient. They'll work for a few months until the other party falls for it and actually hands over the money. Interestingly, when men are targeted, it's different, and it's sort of a lot easier, really. Basically, if you're going after a man, you pick a middle-aged man and you put up a picture of a pretty girl, probably age 25, and you say, hello, I really like you, send me money. and guess what? They'll hand over the money. There was this guy we interviewed who'd fallen for this. Basically, he thought he was talking to a young lady. It turned out he was talking to a man, a fraudster, but he thought he was talking to a young lady. They'd been talking for quite a while. This so-called young lady then said she wanted to come and visit him in the UK. He had sent over the money to buy the airfare, to buy the tickets to come over. he had been sent details of the flight, when it was going to land and so forth. So he went to the airport with his chocolates and his flowers to meet the lady, and obviously she didn't turn up. Everyone left the aeroplane, and finally everyone was gone, and he was standing there with his chocolates and his flowers, and he went and asked whether there was anyone else on the plane, and they said no, and he was all upset and threw his chocolates and flowers away and went home again and got on his computer and said, "What happened? Where are you?" And the fraudster said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I missed the plane, it was a real disaster, they wouldn't let me fly, they're going to give me the money back, but in the meantime, could you send the money again so that I can get on the next flight?" And he sent the money again for the second time. So if you want to do this sort of fraud, then target middle-aged men, because they'll fall for it every time, and that goes on often. Now, you may laugh at that and think, well, I would never fall for something like that, but here was an experiment that was done by a researcher a few years ago, a researcher called Thomas Ryan at a company called Provide Security in the US. And what he did was to create a profile online of a person called Robin Sage, and he targeted people in the defense industry to see whether they would fall for it. So he created a LinkedIn profile, various other social media profiles. He said that she had been to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, she was working in as a cyber threat analysis in the Naval Network of Warfare Command, etc., etc. And then he started reaching out to people to try and make contact in the industry. And he was reaching out to people in the defense industry, in the military, in the intelligence, with this fake profile, and managed to establish 140 or more connections. People started talking to this so-called Robin Sage. Some people actually shared documents with her just to get her view on confidential documents that they were creating. She got a couple of job offers. She got invitations to speak at conferences. He only did this for about a month, and yet he managed to build this huge network from this fake profile. So the thing to think about is, if you think you're clever, if you think you know how these people are going to operate, then think again, because they're very smart. And a profile like that, if one of those people was then to get an email from this Robin Sage and say, "Hey, I've drafted this document, do you want to take a look at it, click here," they probably would click. Even if they were smart enough not usually to click on spam email, they think this is someone that they know, they've linked to them on LinkedIn, they get an email, they click, and then it's downloaded a virus, and everything goes from there. So the fraudsters are getting smarter and smarter, and basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to complete the jigsaw. They're trying to get enough personal information to commit some sort of fraud with that information. So sometimes organizations say, well, we haven't got all the information, so what would a fraudster really be able to achieve if they got the information from us? Well, actually, you could be the last bit of the jigsaw that gives them that complete picture that they can go off and do something. A few years ago, I was involved in doing a TV program, and we did a bit of work down in Brighton in the UK, where I was asked to go onto the street and ask members of the public to just give me their name and their approximate age. You know, were they in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and just give me their name and nothing else. And then for me to go online and see how much information I could find out about those people. And what I found was, in about 30% of cases, I could find enough information about someone where I started just with their name and their approximate age. In about a third of the cases, I could find enough information that I could have stolen their identity and used it to apply for credit cards and that sort of thing if I'd wanted to. And the reason why credit reference agencies, credit reference bureaus are targeted is that the information that you hold, bank information, credit card information, store card information, names, addresses, dates of birth, links with other people, and so forth. All of that information is the information that a fraudster is looking for in order to go off and apply for a credit card, for a bank loan, to access a bank account, and so forth. They use that information to try and pass security questions or set up identities with other organizations, store cards, mobile phone cards, etc., etc. So that's why fraudsters are so keen on getting access to credit reference data, and that's why we have to keep an eye on them and try and defend against them. The technical guy, the hacker, is different. The hacker wants to try and place something nasty in your computer or try and access your database using technical means. And in this domain, you'll hear about things like key loggers, whereby a piece of software on your computer just copies every keystroke that you do. So you type in your password, there's a tiny program sitting behind the scenes there, taking a copy of your password and sending that information off to someone else. There are things like CryptoLocker, programs that they download onto your computer or maybe onto your servers and say, right, we are going to encrypt all of your data, and unless you pay us a ransom, we won't decrypt it. You've lost that data forever. So they'll try and do that type of thing as well. They'll try and put Trojan horses, which often open up a backdoor into your computer, into your servers. Sometimes the programs will try and be disruptive themselves to knock out the systems. Sometimes, like spyware, they're sitting there just gathering personal information and sending it off. So these bits of software that they'll download, these viruses and keyloggers and worms and scareware, spyware, are all put on your servers, on your computer, to do some sort of damage or to copy information and so forth. When they get this information, what they're doing with it is that they are taking it off to markets. There are markets online for personal data. According to Experian, in 2014, something like 110 million pieces of personal data were traded in these markets, bought and sold. This could be email addresses plus passwords, credit card numbers plus the 3-digit number on the back and the expiry date, everything the fraudster needs to make use of it. It could be login details to your servers. It can be driving license information, passport information. You can go into these sites. I've seen a lot of these sites. So at one point when we were looking at it a while ago, there was something like 70 to 100 of these sites out there continuously trading personal information between them. And fraudsters will go into the market and say, I'm looking for 1,000 credit cards. Who will sell me 1,000 credit cards? And someone else will come up and say, I'm selling credit cards, here's the price and so forth. And it does actually function like a market. There's an aftercare service if you're not satisfied with the goods. If you use a credit card and it doesn't work, then you can go back to the person that sold it to you and maybe they'll give you another credit card instead. Sometimes what they'll do to test a credit card, and you can keep an eye out for this sort of thing, is they'll actually use the card to make a small donation to a charity, just to see whether the credit card number that you've given them actually works. And they try and make it small enough that the actual owner of the credit card probably wouldn't notice, or they wouldn't think that it was odd that there was a donation of £1 or £5 to Save the Children or whatever it was. So this sort of thing goes on all the time. So there are the people who extract information and the people who sell that information and make use of it. One of the areas that we need to keep an eye on and defend against is this whole area of what are known as botnets. And botnets are collections of computers that work as a team in order to do nasty things like do what are called denial of service attacks or send out large amounts of spam. And these are some of the names of some of the well-known botnets over the last few years. And they keep evolving and changing. But some of these are huge. For example, the Configure botnet at its height was estimated to have something like 10 million individual computers attached to it. Core Flood had 2.3 million computers associated with it. Bredo Labs was a botnet that was all about sending out emails, spam emails. And at its height a few years ago, the Bredo Labs botnet was sending out an estimated 3.6 billion emails per day. That's how many emails that botnet was sending out. Sometimes these botnets get disrupted and closed down. So in 2011, the FBI, working with the Estonian police and Trend Micro and other partners, managed to take down the EST host botnet that had about 4 million users at the time. And that botnet had 4 million computers controlled by about 100 command and control servers. A lot of people won't even know that their computer has actually become part of a botnet, that it's already been infected, because when these fraudsters, when these hackers make your computer part of a botnet, they don't actually want to cause your computer any problem, because they want to use your computer when you're asleep. If your computer's attached to the internet, they want to be able to wake it up and make it start sending out emails. So the last thing they want to do is actually cause your computer a problem. So one of the issues is that a lot of people around the world are infected by botnet bits of software, and they don't even know it. And quite often in organizations, if you check your own organization, you'll be surprised to find that some of your own companies' computers are parts of botnets. They're infected by botnet software as well. So you need to continuously scan for that. One of the ways these botnets are used is to launch what are called denial of service attacks. And this is where I, as a botnet controller, might ask 1,000 or 10,000 or 1 million of my computers under my control, all at the same time, to send you a message. Now, you are not expecting to get a message from 1 million computers or 10,000 computers all at the same time. And your systems will most likely fall over if that happens, just under the sheer scale of attack. And a denial of service attack is a real problem to organizations. And we've seen some recently. So over Christmas, for example, the Sony and Microsoft were both victims of large-scale denial of service attacks. In the US, a company called Encapsula did a report recently on denial of service. They called it DDoS Impact Report, and it surveyed 270 companies in the US, and 45% of them said that they had been hit by denial of service attacks at an average cost of about $500,000. And 2/3 of them said that they had been targeted 2 or more times. So it's not the sort of thing where you get hit by an attack once and then it stops. Once you've been hit by an attack, the attackers are most likely going to come back and hit you again and again. Sometimes these attacks will go on for 1 or 2 hours and your system becomes completely unusable for 1 or 2 hours. Sometimes they'll go on for longer, and the Sony Microsoft attacks were estimated at more like 14 hours. Some have gone on for several days. It just varies. But one of the things to think about is the interesting position for credit reference agencies, where you sit, in a sense, at the center of the financial system, with banks and other organizations querying you to get answers about whether they should lend money, whether they should open accounts, check in identities, and so forth. If a credit bureau is a victim of a denial of service attack, it doesn't just affect that credit bureau, it affects other parts of the financial services industry as well, and then potentially affects their clients. So a denial of service attack on a credit bureau can really do quite significant damage both to the reputation of that bureau and to the rest of the financial services sector as well. It's very difficult to defend against denial of service attacks, but there are certainly things you can do to mitigate against the attacks. One of the most important things, though, is if you've been a victim of one of those attacks, how quickly can you get yourself back up and back online again? And some of the discussion that you'll see online about Sony and Microsoft over Christmas was comparing Microsoft's response to Sony's response after the attack, how quickly they managed to get their systems back up and running and sorted out, because one of them did it really quickly, the other one took quite a bit longer. So the question is, if your organization was the victim of a denial of service attack, how quickly will you be able to get back up and running? Now, how do you tackle these sorts of issues? Some of the things are organizational, some of the things are technical. I feel that if you're a credit reference agency, you need to have a senior executive who is in charge of information security in the organization. That person is typically called a Chief Information Security Officer. So that person will usually be a very experienced executive in this field who is watching what's going on, is keeping up to speed on all the issues, has the budget to handle things, and reports in at a high level. That person will be giving briefings to the board, briefing to the chief executive about what's going on. And particularly in a credit bureau, if I went and looked at a credit bureau and that credit bureau didn't have a chief information security officer, I really would be scratching my head and saying, are they taking information security seriously? The other thing you need to do is you need to include cybersecurity in your risk assessment exercise. Organizations will, from time to time, every 6 months, every year, they'll go through a risk assessment exercise. What are the commercial risks? What are the operational risks, and so forth? There needs to be what are the cybersecurity risks as part of that risk assessment exercise in order to get a complete picture of what's going on. Understanding the level of risk is really important. How do you know whether you're good enough? How do you know how you compare against other people? And there are some interesting models emerging about how you can really quantify and assess the level of risk that your organization is facing. In particular, Professor Stupples at City University here in London and his team have done some really interesting research in this area that we've been looking at and working with to help organizations understand their risk in this area. And then you need to cooperate on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not an area that you compete against your peers in the industry, because you really need to know what other credit bureau are doing, what they've already learned that you can learn from. So you need to share information with them, particularly in your industry. There might be other areas where you share information as well. So you might share information with your regulator, your bank, and so forth. But if you're in one country, what are people doing in the UK, in the US, in Australia, wherever it is? How are they handling these cybersecurity issues? That's really, really important to understand. And that's why, following the conference that I attended in October last year, on the Credit Bureau conference in Dubai, we've decided to work on a cybersecurity program this year specifically for credit bureaus, where we're just going to take a small group of credit bureaus. We don't want too many, but we're going to work with maybe 5 or 6 around the world who understand how important cybersecurity is. We're going to do an on-site review with each of those bureaus as an overview to say, how are you handling cybersecurity at the moment, and bring our expertise and my expertise as the managing director of a credit bureau to the party to say, look, this is how we did it here, how are you doing it? We're then going to use our risk assessment tools to try and help you understand where the risks are and what areas in particular you need to focus on and how you compare with others. And then in Q4 this year, we're running a 2-day cybersecurity seminar in London specifically for credit bureaus, because the issues for credit bureaus are quite specific, and we'll have credit bureaus from different parts of the world together behind closed doors, really getting into some detail with some expertise, some experts here in the UK to understand what the issues are and how they can be dealt with. If this is something that you guys are interested in, then I've put David Ross's contact information there. Please reach out to him and he'll tell you more about it. So thank you very much for listening. I hope I didn't scare you too much. This is an area where it's a fast-moving area. There are real challenges, but there are also solutions that you can put in place to mitigate problems, and there's a lot that can be learned from other people as well. Those are our contact details. Please follow us on Twitter at Crossword Cyber, where we will keep you up to date on things that we think are important. The website's there, crosswordcybersecurity.com, and my email address, tom.ilube at crosswordcybersecurity.com. Please feel free to email me with any questions after this. But I'm also quite happy to take questions now if there are any. So please fire away.
Hi Tom, it's Simon Camilleri here from Malta.
Hi there.
I've got one curious thing you're seeing in the press quite a lot with cybersecurity. There's a lot of state-sponsored stuff going on. You mentioned Sony as a good example. Mm-hmm. How the hell can you protect yourself against that sort of security? You know, I know they might not likely target countries like Malta or us, but if they want the data, what's stopping them from getting the data when you've got that sort of level behind them?
Yeah. I mean, it's the area that you'll see. It comes under the label of Advanced Persistent Threat, APT, and you'll hear that phrase being used over and over again. And what's really being talked about there is where a country will decide that it wants to get information either from another country or from another organization, and they'll basically have a bunch of guys, very, very smart, very, very technical guys, who go into work, and every morning, from morning till night, their job is to try and penetrate your organization. So you're right, Simon, it is incredibly difficult. If somebody decides that's their day job, you know, you or I go to work in the morning and we do whatever our day job is, their day job is to try and penetrate your organization. There are other companies that are doing a lot to try and identify whether you are under attack from advanced persistent threat types of attacks, because they usually, there tends to be a certain pattern of approach which is different to a sort of general hacker. So it's difficult to defend against them. You have to encrypt important data. You have to separate out data. There's a new and emerging area, quite a new area, that's called multi-party computation, whereby you separate out your data into different bits. You encrypt that data, and therefore, if somebody wants to see your data, they're going to have to find sort of the different bits of the jigsaw, and they're going to have to unencrypt it, and they're going to have to put it all back together again. So you can make it as hard as possible to try and defend against it. But you're absolutely right. The resources that some countries put into targeting other countries or businesses in other countries is really quite astounding.
Tom, I have a question from Guyana, from Judy. Can you suggest some simple means for actually assessing your internal and external cyber risks?
Yes. I mean, one of the things that we'll be able to share with you, and Emma, I'd be quite happy to share with you, and you can think about how to make it available, is basically there are there are questionnaires and there are models. We're building a model at the moment. We're building a really easy to use system at the moment that will ask you a series of questions that are relatively easy to run through, or to go off and find the information and come back and put it into the model. And it will then do a bit of processing behind the scenes. It'll take information from our research and from other parts of the world where we've collected information on risks and so forth, and it will give you, your organization, your company, a risk assessment of where you're strong, where you're weak, where the gaps are, and what you should be doing against it. There'll be other models out there that will do the same thing, but by, I think, around March, April time, we'll have that model ready and available. And that's the sort of thing where what you need is someone in your technical area, not necessarily a cybersecurity specialist, but someone in your technical area who understands and has an appreciation of some of these issues. One of these sorts of questionnaires or models, and then you just walk through the process, and the reports that come out of that will give you a really good steer of where you should be focusing. Because one of the dangers in this area is sometimes people will think, well, I've got a firewall in place, so I'm sorted, and that's it. You know, they'll do one thing, they've spent a bit of money, they've put a firewall in place, and they're happy, and they're done. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as that. There are probably, could be anywhere between 30 and 50 attack paths into your organization, and you need to assess your risk along multiple paths in order to decide how secure you are.
Thank you. It'd be great to share that with you in March. I have another comment from Malta, from Athelin. One of the major issues that he sees is to bring your device to work, and it constantly infects the networks, and you end up spending a fortune trying to protect your business, and then somebody goes and, as he says, brings the device to work. You know, is that one of the major?
Yeah. There's a lot of discussion. Each year there's a conference in London called InfoSec, which is the Information Security Conference. And I was at InfoSec in 2014. It was in May. And there were a lot of stands there where people were offering solutions or discussing the issue of bring your own device to work, because this is a real area of problem. It's sort of a challenge, really, because on the one hand, as an organization, you need to be flexible. You need to make it easy for your staff to make use of their own devices, both inside and outside of work. But on the other hand, it does open up your organization to bigger risks. So organizations around the world are definitely struggling with bring your own device to work, and security officers around the world, cybersecurity officers around the world, whenever they hear the chief information officer or the chief executive say, hey, we're going to open up and let people bring their own device, they start pulling their hair out and think, oh my goodness, this is a problem. So Athelin, you're definitely not alone there. We're all facing it. It is a big challenge. There's a lot of research going on in the university field as well about how you can sort of create almost protected environments. So your device sits in a virtual sense, sits within a closed and protected environment that tries to stop it from being able to affect the network, but it's very difficult to do.
This is Daniel in Nairobi. I have a quick one. We're just about to go through a security audit of our system, and one of the things that's been mentioned is penetration test. Yeah. I don't know if I heard you mention anything about that. Maybe you could say a few words about that, and what the people will be looking out for. What will be doing exactly?
Yeah. So penetration testing is important. Every organization at some point needs to have a penetration test. The question will be, when I was chief information officer of a bank, sometimes what a penetration test is that an outside company will basically try and hack into your system. And then they will let you know after the event how far they were able to get and whether they were able to cause any damage or not, or potentially cause any damage. They can do this in a couple of different ways, in the sense of sometimes they will tell you what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. So it's visible and it's kind of transparent, and they say, look, we're going to try and attack this bit of your system, that bit of your system. Can you give us information about the system and so forth? So you know when they're going to do it, and you see what they're doing, and then they report back to you. At other times, if it's a different type of penetration test, they'll do it without you even knowing. So what I would do, for example, when I was Chief Information Officer, if I wanted to really put my security guys to the test, I would organize a penetration test without them even knowing that that's what I was doing. And then I would call them to a meeting after it had happened with the company that had done the penetration test, and they would walk through the results of that penetration test. They're really trying to prod and probe every bit of your system to see whether there are any ways into it. Are there any passwords that are easy to guess or to hack? Are there any ports that are open on your servers that they're able to gain access? If they send in any emails with attachments that will give them access, did any of the staff click on those emails? And then once they're inside the organization, are they able, for example, to get to the data? Are your password files encrypted, for example? Or are your password, could I get to a bit of your system, find your password files, and there it all is in black and white available to me? Or are those password files encrypted? So it's not just a case of can they get into the organization, it's also a case of if they do get into the organization, then how much visibility do they actually have? But it's a useful exercise. It can be an unsettling exercise because it feels like you're being put to the test, but you would rather that they did it rather than the bad guys do it a month later. So the more time they can spend doing a proper penetration test, the better. And if you're in another part of the organization and you haven't had a penetration test, it's probably a good idea to get one done, because then at least you know what the problems are before someone else finds them.
I have a question. This is Megan from Jamaica, following up on Daniel. We have actually just gone to a request for proposal from 3 of the IT audit firms to have a SAS 70 or a SECA 5970 test done, because it is actually a requirement of some of our big international credit information providers. Which is the better international standard for security testing?
Oh, I can't say off the top of my head, but if you want to email me what you're thinking of doing, I can have do a bit of research here and ask some of my colleagues and give you an opinion.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay. Someone, Michael's asked a question I can see. It says, I have one question in mind. How much is encryption of data like MD5, SSH, etc., and certificates efficient? I mean, in an organization, there should really be, someone should have gone through the data that you hold and decide which data needs to be encrypted, which data doesn't need to be encrypted. Some organizations go too far and start thinking, oh my goodness, we need to encrypt everything. And that's very rarely the case. In banks and so forth, you don't need to do that. It's key bits of information that need to be encrypted. If data is encrypted, then it becomes slower to do processing, because when you want to do processing, you have to unencrypt it, and then you do the processing, and then you have to encrypt it again, and so forth. So you don't want to encrypt everything, but you do want to go through and decide what should and shouldn't be encrypted. And generally, if you have encrypted, I mean, some people will say, well, you know, if we've only encrypted it to this level, you know, is it good enough? Can people hack it anyway, and so forth? And yes, in some cases that is the case, that you may even have encrypted it, but people can still work out what it is, particularly with password files. But that's no excuse for not encrypting it. And one of the things about cyber criminals generally is, even though they're smart, they're sort of lazy, in the sense that if one organization has made its information, has left itself wide open and its data is not encrypted, and another organization has left itself wide open and its data is encrypted, it will go after the one where the data is not encrypted, even if it could spend the resources trying to crack the encrypted data. It'll just take they'll take the easy route, and they'll go after the ones that are not encrypted. So I would encourage people, even if you're a bit dubious about how much value it is, I would encourage you to look at the data, try and decide which data we ought to be encrypting, which data we shouldn't, and get that data encrypted. Password files in particular, key bits of personal information should be encrypted.
I have another question for you, Tom, from Phil in Guyana. Do you know if there are any reports on credit bureaus being hacked? And if so, what sort of inappropriate access was granted?
Credit bureau tend not to like to talk about incidents of hacking. I suppose for obvious reasons, and actually that's part of the reason why it's such an important issue, because a lot of what, as you all know, a lot of what a credit bureau does is based on confidence. You're going out to all these banks saying, give us your information, we're going to look after it for you, and we're going to provide services. As soon as you do that, you're putting yourself in a central position of trust amongst a group of organizations. So the moment that you say, sorry guys, we've been hacked and we lost this, that and the other information, then that issue of that trust position is shaken. However, in the US, these days, they have their reporting requirements, whereby if there is a data breach, you have to report on it. And the slide that I showed you earlier is, let me see if I can get back to it here. I don't know if you can still see the slides, but so slide number 8 that I showed you is an example. Those examples have come out of the fact that the likes of Equifax, TransUnion, Experian in the US, in certain situations, are obliged to talk about what's happened to their systems. And if you search online, you can gradually pull together the information about incidents. I would say that it happens in, where it does happen, it happens in 3 or 4 ways. One is where there is a genuine sort of outside hack, where somebody has managed to hack the systems from outside and gain access to the databases. Another is where what they've actually done is to hack or infiltrate one of your partners. So I think one of the Experian breaches was because the fraudsters or the hackers had got login details from a partner and then use those login details to access Experian's systems. So it might not even be your systems that are being hacked. It might be your partner's systems that have been compromised in some way, and that's how they get to your systems or your data. Another way is the insider threat, which I mentioned is becoming an increasing issue. If I wanted to hack or gain access to a credit reference agency's data, then I could either spend my time trying to crack your defenses, or I could send one of my boys to try and get a job in your organization. And I might tell him to just work there for 6 months and do his job and not mess about and work hard. And then after 6 months, could he please try and find a way to take a copy of the entire database and give it to me. So yeah, the other thing, you need a heightened level of vetting of employees and of looking at the access rights that different employees have to make sure that they don't have access to more information, and there's no way they can get access to more information than they need to do their jobs. So I think those are the sorts of defenses that a credit reference agency needs to watch against. But the place to look for examples of where this has happened to credit reference agencies tends to be the US, because they have this obligation to report on what's happened.
If anyone does have any questions, if they emailed you directly?
Yeah, absolutely, that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much, Tom. And just so everybody knows, Tom's kindly agreed to attend the Creditinfo Global Forum in September, so you'll like to get to meet him in person then and ask him even more questions. Okay.
Great.
Thank you ever so much, Tom. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.
Thank you.